everybody. Welcome to the Hard Truth About B2B eCommerce. I am your usual co-host, Timothy Peterson. Isaiah Bollinger, who is CEO of Trellis, is unable to make it today. So I'm going it alone, and I hope that's going to be okay for our viewers and listeners. But it's a pleasure to have you. So just a word about the podcast in general. We decided to launch this a little while ago because we felt like there was a lot of talk about B2C e-commerce out in the podcast universe. And I have worked in B2C as well, so have many of us, but not quite as much talk, not quite as much conversation with experts in B2B e-commerce. So we felt we'd be filling a gap, filling a need, and getting some great folks in to chat. And that's what we're going to do today. Before I introduce today's guests, I just want to give a quick word about our sponsor. We are very happy to work with PunchOut2Go. They are a global integration company specializing in connecting commerce business platforms with e-procurement and ERP applications. And PunchOut2Go's iPaaS technology seamlessly links business applications to automate the flow of purchasing data. With their solution, you can immediately reduce integration complexities. They're a really great partner of ours. They've worked with Trellis before, and we thank them for their sponsorship. So PunchOut2Go. Now, I'd like to introduce today's guest. We have Steve Engelbrecht, who is the CEO of Citation. And I'm going to let him give a little explanation about the company and himself, and then we'll kick it off from there.
Great. Hey, Tim, thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it. And hello, Isaiah. Sorry you couldn't make it today, but I'm sure you'll be catching up on this later on. I'm Steve Engelbrecht. I'm the founder and CEO of Citation. Citation is a software and services firm in the e-commerce space, and we are specialists in a relatively narrow but extremely important aspect of e-commerce, which is e-commerce content and data management. So we have built a practice around some very important aspects of the e-commerce data modeling and the various flows of content and data through the enterprise. That includes taxonomy, the product data itself, so your product level information, site search, and also e-commerce SEO. We are headquartered outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, but I'm joining you today from my summer cabin in upstate New York, so hence the rustic background. That is really where I am. There's a lovely lake over here that we're going to go take a dip in later on today. But thanks again for having us. We're excited to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
It's really great to have you. So I'm going to ask just a quick question for a little bit more about your background. What led you to found Citation? What kind of work did you do before, and what brought you to create this business?
Yeah, so kind of a unique founder story, I think, in that Citation is growing very quickly in recent years, but wasn't founded particularly recently. I actually started Citation all the way back in 2001. It was right when I got out of college. So I graduated from Cornell as a computer science graduate in 2001. My first day of work was September 10th, 2001. So I had a strange and terrible and different sort of first week. And within 5 weeks, I was laid off from that first job, along with about 30% of that company. I had done some moonlighting, some freelance work while I was a student at Cornell, building some websites. My goal had always been to start a business, and I decided all the way back in October of 2001 that that's what I would do. So I took the money from the few weeks that I had worked, plus my severance package, and I went and started Citation then. Over the years, the business has changed and grown. Initially, it was a web development shop. I got into building some interesting e-commerce applications. Decided to go back to school 2007 to 2009, got my MBA, and then moved firmly into the management consulting space and found my way into really positioning the company in the gap between business and IT at large retail, distribution, brand, and manufacturing companies. And found that space to be interesting and lots of opportunity there. I think because there's so many big challenges, there's so much opportunity with respect to how important it is to create a structured data experience for your end users. companies want to invest heavily in it because I think they realize the importance of it. But we've found that large companies tend to fall into bad habits when it comes to product data. So we've really positioned Citation as a company that can help, right? So we bring some strategy, we bring some data and analytics offerings, and also a systems group, which does some solutioning, some design, some custom work, some implementation work with some of our channel partners. And we help our customers to become more efficient, more proactive, more customer focused in their collection, storage, enrichment, and publication of product data.
So our listeners have heard me bring up some of these examples before, but I'm going to bring up one in particular right now. So some of my early career was helping catalog businesses and retailers first get online, right?
Yeah.
And so it was that very exciting, first.com boom era where people were just trying to figure out how to do that. But it leads right into, I think, a very hot topic for today, product data, as you just mentioned, where things are coming from different sources now. It's different types of data. It's a lot more data. I mean, I remember, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong from your early memories of this, but I used to see files that were basically these like 2-sentence short text files for a product description, and then there'd be a single image, and then, there would be like some other, back end coded, number, UPC or whatever it was needed at that time.
Right.
Then there'd be separate files for like call centers, or something else. So tell me just a little bit about, this data and how you see it today and what the challenges are. I think that's something I'm very interested in.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think you're really getting at one of the hearts of a major movement, if you will, in the B2B world today, which is a term that's tossed around too much, but it's an important one, and that is digital transformation, right? I think B2B companies generally are later to this party than B2C companies have been. I think Amazon, eBay, Google, Apple, these mega brands that are largely consumer facing have driven so many expectations around what people want to be able to do online. And many business customers are frustrated because they expect their business trading partners to be able to do the same thing. A great example would be the completeness and the quality of the product data like you're talking about. I think site search is another great example of being able to type in with a natural language search of what you're looking for. Whereas many B2B companies today are still, they're still basically only able to support really a lookup function based on a part number or a particular brand. So, I think what this gets into is that journey from catalog distributor or catalog brand. And we've done a lot of work in the automotive world, so that's a great example of that. So many of the distributors in the automotive world, big, thick catalogs with just table after table of what part number goes with what car, what year, make, model, engine. Yeah. But that journey has been to go from paper catalogs to a digitized version of that paper catalog that's just put up online that people can download and interact with, to an actual interactive catalog online, then to the ability to take an order online, and then actually getting into a true e-commerce experience. And now we're starting to see the really exciting part, which is when you go from I have a website to the website is a core integrated part of our selling and service model, which really is, I think the goal where B2B companies should want to be, which is that your e-commerce experience is not a bolt-on to your existing way of doing business with your salespeople that are out in the field, but rather a integral part of an omni-channel experience that really enriches the full cycle, including your customers that want to order through a salesperson.
So I think this ties in with process, because this is one of the things we were sending questions back and forth about before. I mean, I think when in my conversations with people in B2B, and I've worked with a number. I worked with JC Whitney, for example, when I'm thinking of parts, and yep. How these various things have to get done today. It's the experience that's missing, and getting that process right, so that the end consumer for B2B, right, or B2C can have a similar experience, right? I think that's a way to put it, one way to put it, because B2C seems a little bit further ahead in a lot of these areas. I think there are more of those consumers, I guess, and they've demanded it earlier. Or
Yeah.
it's hard to say why, but let's talk a little about that process. Like, how do you walk a
Sure.
business through that to get them to where they need to be?
Well, I have some thoughts on why that is, right? Why B2B is different first. So
Hmm.
I think many of the things that we as individual consumers, shopping for ourselves or for our families, the things that we're buying are largely things that we know and we're able to shop. They're things that we are shopping for by name. We're looking for the latest iPhone, we're looking for the latest laptop, or whatever it might be. So we're able to go and largely search on price, right? We can go out and we can find where we want to get it, but we know how to ask for it, and then it's really just a validation of, yes, that's the thing that I want, and then I can buy it. I think apparel is another great example. It's so heavily driven by digital assets, right? By product imagery to say, yes, that looks nice, that looks like what I want. Do you have my size? Okay, I'm going to get that. But in the B2B world, so much of what is being sold is, it's not something that's easily described or shown in a picture. It really needs to be defined by its product data, and in particular, technical attributes, right? It becomes very, very important to think about fitment and size and material and the finish, the threading, the whatever it might be about that particular item. And until that end user, that business shopper, actually has that thing in their hand, the data is the product. That's all they have that they can shop, right? That is the store, that is the product, it's everything. And if they can't find it, or they can't understand it, or they don't feel comfortable pulling the trigger on making that purchase because you haven't given them that element of trust and knowing that you actually have what you're telling me you have, you're not going to get the sale, right? So it really is it's a totally different equation. That plus, we shop as consumers, right? You can convince me to buy something that I didn't know I was going to buy. Whereas a B2B customer is buying it because they have to, right? It's part of their job, right? So they are demanding a much more elegant, efficient experience to make me feel comfortable, to know that you have the thing that I'm looking for. Show me the price, let me know when I can have it, and make sure you have enough of them that I need to buy, and let me go about my day, because it's part of my job to buy that thing. I'm not shopping for fun.
Well, one of the challenges, and I'll give you a real life example, because I like to quiz people I know who are, various types of business people, and just see, what's up in their lives and what their challenges are. So I know someone who is a plumber, and he turned his plumbing business into an irrigation business, a sprinkler business. And it's quite big. I mean, he really does a lot of work, and there's a lot of people working for him, and he's constantly getting parts, right? So I said, well, how are you doing this? What's happening? He's like, well, I would prefer to do it mostly online, right? And he makes that very clear. He would prefer, but he said in a lot of situations, if he doesn't have an exact part number, he needs to go into a warehouse of some sort and talk with a person and physically show this particular item and say, help, right? And he said, but he doesn't want to do that, right? He's a very busy man with a very sophisticated business otherwise. The way he markets it and how he gets customers in and how he handles customer service and all these things. This is the piece that's not yet sophisticated for him, right? He needs that help. And he's like, well, why hasn't it happened? I'm like, I don't know. That's a good question. Why hasn't it, right? So
Yeah, it's a perfect example of the problem. So I think this is a good example of where B2B would be different too. So think about that exact example. If he's got a sprinkler head or something that he needs to try to replace,
mhm.
he pulls off the one that's broken, and he can see a manufacturer name and a part number on it. So he can go out and look for that. But very likely, in many lines of business, again, automotive is a great example, there may be an OEM manufacturer of that particular thing, but there might be countless aftermarket providers that sell it as a different model number. right? So then you're getting into at least 2, maybe even 3 data sources that need to all come together and work together in order to help that customer find what they're looking for. What is this thing? What unit or model or product family or parent part does it actually go with? So the fitment data. And then this cross-reference data of OEM to aftermarket, so that I can actually find something that you actually have, right? I can understand, will this actually fit my particular application? So you can see all the data that's involved here quickly becomes so complicated, and there's just a huge amount of it to manage. And this is why it's crazy to me, but so many B2B players today are still trying to manage all of this complexity in their data with ad hoc manual processes, Excel. It's all Excel,
So I'm going to just move some of these questions around a little bit. So how should they manage it, right? I mean, again, I know a lot of this. Our listeners may not. How should they? Like, what
Sure.
is optimal? Like, what would cause success, right, for a B2B player, who needs to get all of this organized?
Yeah. So I would want to work backwards from what is the experience that we want to enable with this data, right? So we always talk about the 3 things that we're always after with any aspect of our work, whether it's a consulting project, an implementation, some data work, some product data quality work, whatever it might be. 3 things. So number 1, we want to be customer focused, right? So we're thinking about the end user experience. Are we serving them? Are we giving them the information they need? Are we identifying and solutioning the information needs of the end user? Mm-hmm. Secondly, we are creating executive visibility, right? So we're helping that team leader, that executive, that company sponsor to see and understand, where's the opportunity, where do we have inventory flowing through the system? So inventory in the sense of being stuck at a particular station or a backlog being built up, a bottleneck that needs to be addressed, right? And finally, that sorry, this is going to be a good opportunity to edit. Let me collect my thoughts.
That's all right. This is life, people. This is how life works, right?
Right. Okay. All right. So, and the third thing would be that we are data-driven, right? That we are trusting the market, that we are using our analytics, using the data that's flowing through the system. We're not trusting our gut instincts, but we're actually looking to see what information is available. How do we need to mark it up, store it, integrate it into our technology stack to make it serve those 2 important experiences for the customer focus and for the internal executive users to have an understanding of where it is. And if we can achieve those 3 things, then we are helping to create a more proactive model where the data is driving efficiency. The data and the systems and the data models become strategic assets to the enterprise rather than cost centers or commodities, things that we just have to do. Mm-hmm. And I think then it's a lot easier to connect that to what are the systems, processes, tools, people, documentation, et cetera, that we need internally to support those things, right? So not surprisingly, a big part of what we do sits inside what you would call PIM, Product Information Management.
Sure.
But I think that term really it's another one that's overly used, and I think it's too frequently confused with software, right? There are PIM systems, certainly, that is software. But PIM is a business process, right? And it's all about understanding and documenting and really having a clear strategy in place for how product information is flowing through the organization. And it's everything from your data governance to your vendor management to documentation to process design. Certainly, it's about identifying who are the key players and where do they sit in the process and making that into a scalable plan where you can introduce additional resources to bottlenecks in the process to make it more scalable. It's a deep integration plan, so really having an understanding of how those systems fit into the overall enterprise architecture and how data flows through them. And change management, right? It's long-term adoption of those platforms, making sure that you can support the organization as it moves into the future, and very importantly, support any downstream systems that may have very firm requirements about what data and how that data is shaped when it comes out of that upstream system. So those are all the inputs, right? That's what we have to solve as consultants and as business owners and as as merchants, that's what we have to think about, is how do we create a strategy around systems and tools and processes that helps us to get across the finish line. It's not about vanity of having the flashiest, fastest, most expensive PIM system. It is useless if you don't have the processes to support it.
Well, one of the distinctions I've heard, and I didn't come up with this, but actually I've started to use it, is really kind of being both soft and hard when looking at product, meaning that the hard is everything that is, let's say, process oriented, or knowing that particular part number and where it's coming from and how it's being manufactured and all, or whatever, right? The soft is really what are all of the attributes about this and what is it for, right? Is it like, going back to my friend who has a sprinkler business, it's like, well, what is it for? Is how can I search for this most easily? How can I get this when I need it as quickly as possible? So it's those two sides of a coin.
Great example, and I would go one step further and say, regardless of what we call it internally at the sprinkler parts company, what do our customers call this thing? How do they want to shop it, right? How do we help them find what they're looking for? That's very important, and that's the difference between internally, how you're buying, how you are storing and enriching that product data, which is the what, right? It's the what are we selling? And then as you turn in your face your customers in a digital channel or in a omni-channel environment, then you're asking, how do I want to sell it? How are my customers shopping this, right? So we can think about leveraging things like the search engine, right, to build out a very rich experience around natural language, so that we are taking your friend's words of what he wants to call that part and get that into the search engine so that he can find whatever we call that part, right? And it's those little things, it's those little micro improvements across categories, brands, products, the experience. When you can have a program in place to identify and action those across your full assortment, that's when you can really lead to the point that you are building an outstanding differentiated experience that creates competitive advantage, right? Customers want to shop where it's easy to buy.
Exactly, and I'm so glad you mentioned kind of the terminology of things too. Just as an aside, I mean, I also work with like people in fashion and beauty, health and wellness, a lot of other categories, and what's funny is that in recent years, because of since the rise of social media, if a consumer or a group of consumers are starting to call a product something, whatever it is, like they're nicknaming it, they're calling it something, companies are now responding and renaming product, right? So they're not simply saying, like, adding it as an attribute somewhere, adding it as some sort of marketing note. They're actually renaming it. So that happened, I think, first with companies like Nike, renaming sneakers because they knew that people were saying certain things about certain models. And they said, okay, we're just going to do that. Why should we stick with what we did? We're going to do what the consumer wants. And I think that's the same for B2B. It really needs to be, a one-to-one connection there.
Yeah, and there are countless examples of common misspellings. There are differences regionally of what we call things here versus how they're spelled or shopped in Canada or in UK or in Asia. We as merchandisers need to be aware of those, or at least have a process to help us identify those, because they really do matter, right? That helps us to create a much richer, more personalized, lower friction environment to help our customers find the things that they're looking for.
So we talked about customer focused, executive visibility, being data driven, critical things, I think, overall, right? They're just critical things for success. So tell me about, maybe if you want to even give an example, about a successful business that you've worked with, or a project that you've worked on that's been a real wild success.
Sure, yeah, happy to. So our portfolio of customers really ranges from the mid-market up into the enterprise space, into the Fortune 500 space. And we've got a really interesting mix of some real retail categories, things like musical instruments, and then getting into some omni-channel experiences with companies like Staples. So Staples US is a great customer we're working with today. That's a really good example of an omni-channel player where, we as consumers know them as the big box retailer, but there are a huge amount of business that they do on the government side and on the B2B side. So there's a lot of complexity that comes with the data, right? Advanced Auto Parts, another good example of, we know them as the 5,000-6,000 retail locations across the country, but they have to sell so differently to their dealers, to their garages, to the government, to fleet management and fleet maintenance companies, right? So all of that involves the small manipulations of the content as they flow through. A good example where we really had to touch all the different aspects of the product data in order to help create an improved experience would be it's a large electronic components distributor here in the US. They're called Premier Farnell. Actually a UK-based company. They are a $15-ish billion company, now merged with Avnet, which is also in that space, but out of Europe. Really interesting company, huge complexity, huge amount of product data, millions of SKUs, thousands of categories, and then in some cases, hundreds or even more of attributes that need to be attached to different parts and products that live inside those categories. So a really good example of thinking about how hard it is to shop something when all you have is the attributes, right? So we really need to identify what are the attributes that are most important, most critical at a category level, and help those to be shopped. So this is a good example because it really touched all aspects of what we do. The work that we did with Premier Farnell included work on the taxonomy, so not just the customer-facing names for the categories, but also the attributes that lived inside different product families that flowed through those categories. We asked ourselves, are we calling this what a customer expects it to be called? Are we collecting, enriching, and displaying the right information that they need to make a decision? So thinking about the search and filter experience, the browse experience as you get to a category listing page or a search result page. What are the actual choices that show up that I can interact with to take that large search result and bring it down to a smaller set that I'd actually consider for purchasing? We got into lots of interesting opportunities with their site search engine. So, a good example, they were serving the same market, but different geographies. So in the US versus in the UK, and finding things like, in the US, we call it a wrench, and in the UK, they call it a spanner, right? It's a perfect example. You just have to know, right? And you have to find it and map it in order to make sure that we can serve both groups. Or little things like understanding the audience, right? An engineer shops differently than a corporate buyer, right? An engineer might shop heavily on attributes. So we found, for instance, that when they were shopping within resistors or capacitors, they would have a very shortened way of looking for certain critical attributes. The resistance or the capacitance, for instance, is really all they care about. So they would just put that in, right? We need to know on our side that when they put in that attribute value, they're asking for a capacitor or a resistor, and know that we can interpret that and give them a good result. And then we did a lot of work getting into their e-commerce SEO. So using all of these tools at our disposal, the taxonomy, the product data, the site search engine, then we look to see where's the traffic, where's the opportunity, what are our competitors doing, where is there green space in the market that we can put out some content or put out some landing pages and go after these unmet buckets of demand for people that are asking for these things. And this led to a global program that thousands and thousands of data points, integration points that went through all the different systems as it flowed through. But this has resulted in a global SEO success for that company to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars annually in additional sales that they can attribute directly back to those improvements to the data model.
I mean, one of the things I think you just brought up too that's fascinating to me is a lot of businesses only realize that they have a particular customer following when they start getting into this sort of a project or series of projects, right? When they get the process down and they're looking at these things in detail. And an example, I'm going to ask my listeners to forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's Homesense which is also part of the Marshall's TJX family of businesses. I think Homesense is one of their brands. But what they found out after they were doing some sort of a project, digging into categorizing the furniture and accessories, is that a lot of the furniture they were selling, they were really for people who wanted to do staging, like realtors who were staging, for whatever, or for offices that were staging, or they were wondering like if they should get into furniture rental because people were looking to do this. So it was stuff that they had no idea about. No one was really knocking on their door saying, "Can we talk about this?" It was really all based on how people were searching, how the terms were being used, and then studying it all in great detail. It's like, oh, well, if we recategorize these things in a particular way and represent them in a different way, then all of a sudden these people are being served well, and we have a whole new customer base. It's
Great example.
Yeah.
Yeah, great example. So we're really getting into personalization or like a mass customization approach here, where we're helping to identify a persona, right, a target group of who's involved in our site, and what can we do to present them with an e-commerce experience that is more aligned to how they want to shop. I mean, that is a absolutely perfect example. In the auto parts industry, we think about like a jobber, a do-it-yourselfer versus a small business owner. We've worked with some pickup truck accessories with a group called Leonard Accessories that's down in North Carolina. So for them, we think about the hobbyist, the kind of the cool suburban dad with a pickup truck that wants to get the light bars and the toys on his truck versus a guy that uses it every day for work. That's it's a different customer. They're going to be looking for different things. So that can be a very powerful way to inform the merchandising strategy and approach that touches everything from your data to your design to your messaging in your digital marketing channels as well.
So let me just leap into this because we, B2B and B2C, right? I mean, I think it's always important to talk about, the two sides of things, because some businesses do both, some try to just do one and not the other. But, it has seemed until recently, I would say, that B2C has often been ahead of the game in a lot of tech and tools and experience, customer experience, just thinking about how things should be. So, even just mobile, for example, or being part of the social media world, a lot of B2B players kind of waited, right? So what do you think are really hot things that B2B players should be considering that are big successes for B2C players?
Yeah, great example. So, thinking about the way the world has changed here in the last 6 months, I think really informs a lot of this as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen the consequence now play out in graphic detail of what happens when you're a company that is dependent on people physically coming together to the same place are no longer able to do that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there are retailers that are going out of business as a result. There are countless companies in the service economy that have suffered heavily because of it. And it's really interesting to see now when you have a huge shock like this that hits both the the supply and the demand side at the same time and just shuffles everything. The opportunities that fall out of this are going to tend to come on the B2Bs, the distributors, brands, and manufacturers who are able to adapt, right? Or who have already invested in the capability to sell and deliver virtually, right? So, a really good example, thinking about even small businesses who have been smart enough to shift the way that they are selling virtually in real time, right? Leveraging things like delivery services or curbside pickup and all of these. And just the way that people have had to improvise and adapt their businesses virtually overnight has been amazing. And some large companies have done it really successfully too. I mean, look at the way that the Target really pulled off a very quick pivot to be able to do local pickups and do e-commerce sales in like a buy online, pickup in store sort of environment. but basically managing that last mile, being able to have you just come and pick up your stuff from the local Target. They ended up with huge e-commerce numbers that was like, it was like the equivalent of having a Black Friday every day for months, right? Now, much of that shifted from their in-store sales, of course, but still they didn't shut down completely, right? So good examples, I think, are just thinking about how companies are investing in the way that people want to shop or need to shop today, right? And that definitely flows through to B2B customers as well. I think making those smart investments in experience, again, always thinking about the end user. What are their needs? What are they looking for? What information do they need to shop? Whether that is, images or PDFs or filters or whatever it might be on the website that's going to help them figure out what they're looking for. I think if you can give them the confidence that you have the best and fastest and the cleanest shopping experience that helps them to do their job and lets them move on to the next thing, knowing that they don't have to worry about it, that's your opportunity. The next piece is definitely thinking about different channels, right? So where are your customers shopping? Got to talk about Amazon, right? And other major marketplaces that are out there. I mean, there's a huge amount of activity out there right now. Amazon has captured a huge amount, obviously, of the B2C market. They are growing very quickly in the B2B market. That is one of the largest places where people are going to search for products and categories. They have, they're becoming much more sophisticated, I think, now with how they're helping people to use some of their tools to do a better job of merchandising and pricing in those B2B channels. That's another big opportunity. So generally a marketplace strategy. And both of these are completely driven by data, right? You need good, clean data to differentiate yourselves, to participate in those marketplaces. Even something as fundamental as mapping your categories to Amazon categories is challenging, right? These are big catalogs. You could have hundreds or thousands of categories, and Amazon calls it something different. So you need to have an approach that will scale to be able to do all of that. Being able to work through those problems today, those are big pieces of an overall puzzle that go into the modernization and digitization of a B2B enterprise. They are not in and of themselves transformation, but they are important pieces of it.
Well, you brought up so many, so many interesting things in your answer. I really love it. I think our listeners love it too. But I'm a big fan of Target. I have to say, just you mentioning them made me smile. I feel like they've done so many things well in recent years, and especially during this crazy time under COVID-19. I mean, one of the things that surprised me, and again, there is a B2B application in here. We just have to figure out what it is that I placed an order online for my local Target. I was given three choices. I could have had stuff shipped, I could have picked up in store, or I could have had curbside delivery, right? Those three things I think were the choices. I selected curbside, and it was like some folding chairs or something, nothing shocking or, particularly unusual. I just got something like that. In what they did is they questioned my choice of delivery. Basically, they were saying, or no, I said I was going to get it in store. That's it. And then they questioned it. They put a box in and they said, "Are you sure you don't want us to bring this to your car because it's kind of heavy, and we're going to have to put it on a cart, and we're going to have to, you're going to have to wheel it out, and it'll be too much interaction." They really did this, and I was so impressed because it was human, right? And I wasn't thinking about like, okay, I'm getting into the store and it's going to be too big to carry, or I'll have to find a cart. They told me all that, right? And they said, no, you will want to do curbside, because then we will just have it ready for you and we'll put it in your car and then you're off you go. I love that. And I feel like, B2B can really, really have fun with this over time and say, no, those pipes are not something you want to pick up in store. We're going to bring it to your truck, and just here's where you'll meet and here's what will happen, right? It's just such a great personal touch that they add.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. And I think from the customer experience side, to be able to have a really positive experience like that, you're now spreading that word and advocating for them, saying, hey, what a great job they're doing. I mean, that's exactly it. That is the foundation of brand loyalty and brand equity of why you want to go shop at Target versus their competitors, because you feel seen, you feel appreciated, right? They're looking out for you.
And one other thing that you brought up as well, everyone's had to adapt, change, transform, whatever it is for them, over these however many months. And one other thing that I was very impressed by are restaurants that decided to become grocers. And you may have seen some of this, but we noticed this out in New York pretty early, where restaurants had a lot of supplies, and all of a sudden they were forced to close. And they said, well, what do we do with it? So if they already had some sort of an online presence, they retooled it and they said, order your milk, order your vegetables, order your pasta, order your meat through us. Don't go to Stop and Shop or Kroger. Come here, right? And that I thought was absolutely brilliant. It just kind of immediately solved like 5 or 6 problems for these businesses. They had all of this stuff that they couldn't use, I guess, right? They thought they weren't going to be able to use it. And then they said, well, wait, we already have these relationships. So however many months this lasts, you can continue to order these basics through us. And
Yeah.
I think it's a great way to go. It just makes you think, about
Yeah.
what's possible.
Smart decision from management. They probably save some jobs. They save some waste on their side. They're able to keep their doors open for another day. I mean, that's what it takes.
So I'm going to swing back to one other question, just because again, we usually ask this for our listeners, but like, what do you think is really the biggest challenge that you see, across clients that you're talking to for B2B e-commerce right now? What is the biggest challenge, or are there really just the series of challenges we've already talked about?
No question, there are lots of challenges, and I think having a plan is really key to deciding, with all of the unique inputs and all of the idiosyncrasies about your business, what are the investments you need to make? What are the order of operations to go through? But I would say the biggest thing, the biggest driving factor, from the consulting side and from the sales side, I'm always dismayed when we find a great opportunity and we see a huge amount of engagement from the middle tier of management in the company that feels very strongly and is obviously very personally invested in wanting to see an effort to digitize and improve and grow in the e-commerce channel. And that may or may not be our customer. Frequently with the smaller shops, that's we need to be selling to the CEO and owner to be able to make that happen. I think one of the biggest things that needs to be happening in order to really take this seriously is to recognize that this needs to be driven from the top, right? This is not about building a website. It's not about launching a PIM. It's not about a new platform for search. This is about a critically important series of investments and projects in order to transform your whole company from the ground up. And even if that owner, operator, CEO is or is not a technical person, they certainly need to understand the business value of what comes out of those technologies and have a good team who can help to identify and action on those. So I would say the biggest thing from my perspective is that strategic alignment throughout the enterprise or throughout the whole company, that everybody realizes that e-commerce is not an IT function. It's not a marketing function. It is a cross-departmental function that touches every aspect of the organization, right? Purchasing, inventory, marketing, ops in the warehouse, pricing. Every aspect needs to touch it because it's a completely different way of selling, and it should be a major driver of change inside that company.
That is a great answer. And, one of the things that is just a funny memory to kind of underline this, a funny memory for me is that, years ago when I was first working with some online businesses or businesses that were trying to go online for the first time, sort of the Yahoo store era, where people were trying to figure things out. I remember talking with a very large business. I will not embarrass here on this this podcast. A very large business, a multi-billion-dollar business, and they simply wanted their e-commerce business to be treated in the way they were treating, let's say, email. Right? They wanted it to be this little line where we have one person, and that is the e-commerce person, and then we have the email person. It's like, oh my God. If I could go back in my time machine and reproduce that whole meeting again, it would be astounding, because it's changed, but in some ways things haven't changed. It's that realization that great e-commerce, great success in e-commerce is something that is, you're all in, like everybody is involved, and it is your business. It is not something you do in this little line with one person.
And it's fiercely competitive, right? I mean, like the clock is ticking for a company like that that's not ready to pull the trigger on trying to go through that full process of creating an aligned organization and a core strategy to make e-commerce a critical piece of how they sell and operate. If you're not willing to make that investment and that adaptation, a competitor will be, and you're going to lose, right? It's fiercely competitive. Customers want what they want. The world is changing fast. You got to fight like hell if you want your piece.
I want customers to fight like hell to get to you, right? So I would like you to just be inundated with new business based on this.
Thank you. I would like that too.
That's my dream here. So I'm just going to ask you to do another pitch again for Citation to make sure that people understand really what you do, because I think it's been a great time listening to you and talking about B2B e-commerce here.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll answer the question in a slightly different way than I did at the beginning, so it might help people to understand a little bit. Our approach to helping customers through this e-commerce journey and this digital transformation journey has been to create an organization that's really broken into 3 separate but very tightly connected groups. And that is our professional services division. So that's our management consulting group, doing strategy work, lots of work with data governance, with process improvement, with platform selection, really trying to answer some of the big questions of figuring out, what is that overarching strategy? What's that 3 to 5 year plan look like for our e-commerce and as part of our digital and innovation transformation? The second piece is also a service deliverable, but this is our data and analytics team. And that team actually sells the data modeling and the data and the insights as a service. So that's where we're actually doing things like working with our customers to build their taxonomy, right? Doing analysis of your taxonomy, your data model, your attribution versus your key competitors, taking into account what do your key suppliers do, what is Amazon doing, what's available, what's important to your customer, all of that. Getting into product data enrichment, site search analysis, e-commerce SEO insights. Also important to mention, so we have a platform of our own that helps to deliver a lot of those insights. The platform is called Pleasio. That is both something that we use internally to do our work, but also is a platform that we license as a software as a service to our customers. Mm-hmm. And then the third piece is our technology team, our systems group. And they're actually doing the implementations, doing the integration work. There are our programmers and our implementers. We are resellers and certified implementers for Akeneo and Salsify, which are, Akeneo is an open source PIM with an enterprise offering. Salsify, also in the PIM space, they've got a slightly different take on it. They're a little bit more about product data syndication, but they've got some really powerful tools around workflow management that can help to virtually run the business or run those aspects of product data management, which is great. And then we've been involved with countless other platforms, right? When you're working in the enterprise space, it's not just a handful. You don't only work with Salesforce or with SAP. Very frequently, we are working with customers' legacy technologies, right? Homegrown solutions that nobody there any longer was actually directly involved with building out that particular solution. That's very common when we get into big companies, right? So Really, our approach has always been to be platform agnostic, in that we can come in and help to assess the situation, figure out where's the opportunity, what are the needs around data modeling, data quality, completeness, whatever those aspects might be, in order to stay true to those principles, right? Of being data-driven, customer-focused, and creating executive visibility. Ultimately, we are about helping our customers to grow and succeed, and I'll use it again, fight like hell when it comes to the e-commerce world. Again, it is fiercely competitive. We try to position ourselves as the ultimate partner to, have the talent and the tools and the services available to really help our customers shine.
Steve, that was fantastic, and I'm glad it is recorded, because I think that that's something people will really latch on to. Listeners, Steve Engelbrecht, the CEO of Citation. Thanks for a great time. I mean, I'm certainly learning every time I'm with some of our great guests, and this was no exception. That was really a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, Tim. Really appreciate it.
Okay, and so I just want to say sorry once again that we couldn't have our co-host, Isaiah Bollinger, CEO of Trellis. He was unavailable today. He'll be back co-hosting with me in our next episodes. I also want to thank our sponsor once again, Punch Out To Go. And thank you for listening to The Hard Truth About B2B eCommerce. And I'm Timothy Peterson. Take care for everybody. It's a pleasure.